Good morning, happy people. Welcome to another wonderful day of World History 101. This is going to be chapter 3, part 2. This is the India portion. All right, so as we talk about political organization in early China, please understand that the two most important river valleys of China are the Huang, Huang, space He, also known as the Yellow River, and the Yangtze River. The Yellow River, or the Huang Ho, is known as the Yellow River because of the yellowish brown sediment dust that blows from Central Asia to the plains of North China that create very fertile soil. The dust is blown into the rivers, and this is how the Yellow River gets its name. The earliest of China's dynasties are going to develop around the Yellow River Valley, or in the Yellow River Valley. So we have the Xia, Xia, the Shang, Shang, and the Zhou dynasties are going to develop around the Yellow River valleys. Now later, we'll see civilizations like the Chu develop in the Yangtze River valleys. All right, we're not going to spend a lot of time or any time at all on the Xia, Xia, because they don't find any written records. So we're going to start with the Shang Dynasty, Shang. We're going to start with the Shang Dynasty. So the Shang are a hereditary monarchy. They leave written records behind, so we know more about the Shang than we do the Xia. The Shang Dynasty is also associated with the Bronze Age of China. Bronze metallurgy is going to be important to the Shang, and it's going to allow them to monopolize and conquer other people within the region with the Yellow River Valley. So we're going to see horse-drawn chariots with the Shang, improved tools and weapons that allow them to monopolize bronze production, monopolize their power and their control of others within the Yellow River Valley. As a result of advanced weaponry, the Shang kings are going to extend their rule. They're going to use surplus natural production from the conquered people to maintain militaries and political allies. The characteristic political institution of Bronze Age China is going to be the city-state. The largest city-state was the Shang capital, and it frequently moved. The Shang capital is the Yin, Y-I-N, Yin, very important. So with the Shang, I would definitely know that they behind written records. We're going to talk momentarily about how written records are written in pictograph. And that's going to be Chinese form of the Shang form of writing that we're going to see spread throughout the Yellow River Valley. We talked about the fact that the Shang are associated with the Bronze Age. That's going to be important. The Shang are going to be overthrown by the Zhou, Zhou. The Shang are overthrown by the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou are going to be the longest lasting dynasty in Chinese history. They last almost 900 years. The Zhou kings, Zhou, they operate differently. Whereas the Shang kings descended from priestly rulers who had built in authority, they had no need to justify their rule. The Zhou, on the other hand, as they take power from the Shang, they feel the need to justify their rule. Like, why should they be allowed to rule? And the way that they justify their rule is with the mandate of heaven. The mandate of heaven says that the king who rules under the mandate, first of all, a mandate means permission. So the mandate from heaven means that you have received permission from the gods to rule, or the king has received permission from the gods to rule. So because he's received permission, he's going to be known as the Son of Heaven. So the mandate of heaven says that as long as a ruler, this is the rationale for the Zhou being able to take over the Shang. It says that as long as a ruler rules justly, as long as he is kind, benevolent, he's moral, he is kind, benevolent, moral, just, and fair, that his empire will prosper. And he will be continued, he will be allowed to continue to rule by the gods. But when he becomes unjust, immoral, and wicked, legend says that the gods will remove their mandate and the king will no longer be able to rule. And we'll know that his mandate has been removed because the empire will start to decline. We'll see famine, we'll see warfare, we'll see revolt, we'll see rebellion. So all of that will be a signal to the people that the mandate has been pulled. Okay, so that's the mandate of heaven. Understand that the Zhou kingdom is much larger than the Shang. And because it grows so large in scope, they're not going to be able to be ruled directly from the city center. So a city-state is not going to work for the Zhou dynasty. Instead, they're going to have to rely on a decentralized system of government because the empire is too large. The kingdom is too large. So again, the Zhou dynasty is going to utilize a decentralized administration to rule. They basically entrust power in the hands of representatives who act on behalf of the Zhou government. So understand this. That means, again, that as we move away from the city center, as we move away from the king, we're going to see his power lessen and his control lessen. So on the outskirts, you'll definitely have rebellion. By the 8th century BCE, the Zhou kings have become weak, and as a result, they start to lose some of their power over the periphery states. We're going to see the Zhou lose their mandate. And legend says that it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. There was a king who was in love with a concubine, basically. And what he does is she gets excited about all the troops rushing in, as he calls them. So he repeatedly calls in the troops. And when he needed them, of course, they didn't come because he had abused that privilege so many times before. So the last period of the Zhou dynasty is filled with chaos and instability. And because of that chaos and instability, it's known as the Warring States era. The Warring States era, again, represents the last chaotic centuries of Zhou rule. It's filled with instability. We have all these different states vying for power, and that's the end of the Zhou. As the Zhou go away, we're going to see the rise of the first empire that is going to successfully unify China, and that's the Qin dynasty. Qin, the Qin dynasty. And we'll talk about Shi Hanji, I think, in chapter 6. But for now, that's all you need to know about Warring States era and the Zhou. All right, so Chinese society is very patriarchal. They are a very hierarchical oriented society. So there's an order to how their society operates. As you look at the social order, you should look at the royal family being at the top. Hereditary aristocrats are next. We have free artisans and craftsmen. We have peasants. And lastly, we have slaves. When it comes to family, family is a major component of Chinese societal life. In China, the extended family is very important. And because family is so important, Chinese believe in ancestral worship. So ancestral worship or ancestral veneration, that's the same thing. It just means that the dead ancestors are believed to have the power to petition the gods on behalf of the living family members. And the whole point is we're going to keep the ancestral gods, the ancestors, happy in an effort for ourselves to remain prosperous, happy, and healthy. So living family members have to maintain respect and they have to service the dead's needs. Remember Mulan? Like the first one, the cartoon version. In Mulan, like before she was going to war, she to like the, I don't want to call it the gazebo, but the word escapes me right now. She went to the shrine, her ancestors, and she made a sacrifice before she went off to war. Like that's accurate. She would do that. Remember, like Mushu or Wushu, I can't remember his name either, out of like the pictures. That's accurate. So you have to make concessions to the ancestors so you as the living family stay protected. Okay. When it comes to the family park, the family patriarch presides over the rites and ceremonies that are designed to honor the ancestors. So the oldest in the Chinese household has authority over the family. So again, this is a patriarchal society, meaning that males are going to dominate society. And in this case, not only do they dominate society, but they also control the household. And they are the ones who are responsible for carrying out the sacrifices designed to keep the ancestors happy. Okay, let's talk about early Chinese writing and cultural development. China lacked organized religion. So it isn't just one God, or there was no God that they worshipped. Instead, we've already talked about the fact that they focused on ancestral worship. Done that. Let's talk about early Chinese writing. So early Chinese writing is tied closely to oracle bones. However, oracle bones are not the actual form of writing. Oracle bones are like the medium in which we see the pictographs, which are the Chinese form of writing, manifest itself. So the most important information that we have about the Shang Dynasty comes from their inscriptions that are written on oracle bones. An oracle is like a fortune teller, a soothsayer. They tell the future. So what they would do is they would take these bones and they put them in the oven, and the heat over time, over cooking the bones, would crack the bones a certain way. The oracle, like the person, remember the Matrix had a lady named the Oracle? Like she saw the future. So the oracle takes the bones out and they interpret, they read the fortune, and they write the fortune in pictographs. So pictograph is going to be the Shang system of writing. Pictograph is the Shang system of writing. Pictographs are characters that depict an object or an idea. That's pictographs. So forms of writing. We talked about Mesopotamian writing. Yeah. We talked about Egyptian writing with the hieroglyphics. We talked about the fact that we talked about Meroitic writing with Nubia. We talked about pictographs with the Shang Chinese. Cool? All right. If I were you, I'd also pay attention to these nomadic people of Central Asia that are at the very end of the chapter. It talks about how these nomadic steppe people, STEPPE, they serve as intermediaries in developing trade networks across Central Asia. So these nomads depend on the settled agricultural societies to provide them with grains and textiles and metal goods in exchange for horses, and they ultimately serve as the middlemen of trade. These steppe nomads of these grasslands, again, they're engaged in trade with China. They're trading horses for grains and textiles. Last but not least for this chapter, I'd pay attention to the emergence of the Chu state, CHU. The Chu are important because they represent Chinese influence in the South. So an example of this diffusion is the emergence of the Chu state. The Chu were important because they constantly challenged the Zhou dynasty for supremacy. But the difference is, whereas the Zhou originated in the Yellow River Valley, the Chu originate near the Yangtze River Valley. Okay, so we said the earliest civilizations in this chapter for China are going to develop in the Yellow River Valley, and we said that we see later civilizations spread to the Yangtze River Valley. So early civilizations would include the Jia, the Shang, and the Zhou. Let's say it again without biting my tongue. The Jia, the Shang, and the Zhou. And then the Chu are going to develop in the Yangtze River Valley. We talked about oracle bones being key to giving us most of our important information about early China. And the oracle bones have inscriptions in pictograph that detail what people believed. We also talked about, what else? Shang Dynasty associated with Bronze Age. We talked about the Zhou Dynasty being the one that was associated with the mandate of heaven. That idea that as long as a ruler was just, kind, fair, benevolent, and moral, that the empire will prosper because the gods favored you. And as soon as you became immoral and tyrannical, the gods would pull your mandate, your permission to rule. This is the conclusion of chapter 3. I hope you're having a good day. I love you unconditionally. Bye.